This is such a cool product. It's a digital to analog converter. It comes in at a reasonable price, and it's like 2 DACs in one. That's right. This is the Duke Audio. Model number's not on the front. The DAC Q11. It doesn't have one DAC chip, but it has 2 DAC chips, and they're not working together. Double DAC. DAC squared. It's like getting a free DAC. So sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and let's talk about the Duke Audio DAC Q11. This DAC had been offered up to me for review for a while, and well, I thought it was a gimmick. I wasn't really interested in reviewing it, but the more I took a look at it, considered it at its price, why not? Let's have it in. Let's see if this thing is a gimmick, a joke, or if it's a real DAC. Coming in at $159, the Q11 is not only a Saber DAC, but it's an AKM DAC 2. Referring to the chips, the chip manufacturers, we have 2 different chip manufacturers. The Saber chip is a ES9038. It's a good chip. And the AKM chip is a AKM 4493, which is used in other DACs like the, well, one of my favorite is the SMSL SU1, because it comes in around $70 or $80 depending upon whether or not it's on sale. This is coming in at, well, about twice that, but you're getting a different DAC. Claims to have an exceptional signal to noise ratio of greater than 117 dB and ultra low total harmonic distortion of 0.0003. Although I don't really know if that's even, odd order, 5th, 17th, 13th order harmonics. We just don't know. Maybe if someone did some measurements on this. I don't know. If you know of anybody that did measurements, measured this DAC, let me know. I obviously didn't. Fairly straightforward. On the back you have 2 sets of RCA single-ended outs, 2 sets of 3.5 millimeter auxiliary outs, and then you have coax input, optical input, full-size USB input. And then that's where the power goes. Speaking of the power, comes with a 12-volt wall wart. And after you get this device, this is what I would do with the 12-volt wall wart. Not saying it's terrible, but I used a linear power supply to run the Duke Audio Q11. My linear power supply has a 12-volt section and a 5-volt section. So I run my Weem Pro off of the 5-volt section, and then I run whatever DAC I'm using off of the 12-volt section. I wish there was a reasonable, reputable US company that stocked and sold that double 12-volt and 5-volt linear power supply. It's getting to the point where I think I might just have one made that's good. If you would be interested in buying that product, put it down in the comments, because I want there to be a reputable, easy way to get a 12 and a 5-volt linear power supply that has good quality control. On the front, you have a single knob. This knob is used to turn the unit on as well as control volume. It also comes with this, is it this remote control? Yes, this remote control, which has volume down there, and you select your inputs right down there. And then right here is the most important thing, or the funnest part of this DAC, is you change which DAC you're using, whether it's the Saber DAC or it's the AKM DAC or it's both DACs running at the same time. If you are running the Sabre DAC, you are putting out the Sabre DAC output from all of the outputs. If you're running the AKM DAC only, then you're putting it all through the outputs. If you're running both, and there is an option to run both, then you are outputting the Sabre DAC on one RCA output and the AKM DAC on the other RCA output. So how I did it is I hooked this Duke Audio up to the TAC AI303, which has two analog inputs, and then I was able to switch back and forth between the two different DACs and see if I could hear a difference. Did I hear a difference? There is also this very cool window. And when I first saw this, I thought, this is a gimmick. I mean, you could just see inside. Okay, it's kind of cool. I kind of like it. I kind of love it, actually, because it's just glowing. You can see inside. It's pretty cool. There's also two swappable op amps inside. I'm assuming one for each DAC section. Really what this is you have two different DACs sharing the same power supply. That doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies. Also, having two DACs running on the same board at the same time doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies as far as being like the best DAC compared to maybe the SU1 with a 4493 DAC chipset, just like this one. But that doesn't have volume control. That doesn't have a remote control. So there is a lot of value when you think about the Duke Audio DAC Q11. How it sounds. Well, this gets complicated. Many would believe that if it has the same analog output stage, then the DAC chip does not have a sound. It will not affect the sound. My experience has been, well, I wouldn't say different, because I have no idea if this has the same output section on both of it. I would assume not, because depending upon the DAC chip, depends upon the kind of integrated circuit that a manufacturer will suggest one uses. So whenever you buy a DAC chip, like a 9038, 9039, 9038 Pro, there is going to be a circuit design that the manufacturer, I wouldn't say suggests, but says, hey, this is how you integrate this chip. How you do it is up to you, but we're saying if you do it this way, it's going to perform well. So since you have one Sabre and one AKM, and these are different chips too from a voltage output standpoint, then you're going to have two different analog output sections. A lot of people, myself included, would say that the majority of the differences in sound from a DAC will come from the analog output section, whether it's the components used or in most cases simply the design. And the power supply also comes into play and has a great effect on the sound. Maybe not the sound, but the clarity and the three-dimensionality, the cleanliness of instrument separation. I think a good power supply makes more of a difference than maybe the analog output stage does. I could be wrong though. If anybody has changed their power supply on their DACs, put it in the comments. Let me know if you heard an improvement or if it was the same. Getting back to the sound, I listened to Lena Hall, her cover of Creep, which is a great song, and if you haven't listened to it, you really need to listen to it. With the AKM chip, I didn't feel like her voice was as present, and I also didn't feel like I could hear as much air and detail in her voice. And it wasn't really even subtle. I also felt with the AKM chip that she, in as far as the soundstage, was a little bit stepped back. So when I changed it to the 9038, the Sabre portion of the DAC, she came forward a little bit. It cleaned up, and I heard a lot more details around her voice. A lot more. Now, I'm not saying I like the 9038 more than the AKM, because when I listened to Chocolate Chip Trip by Tool, the AKM chip did a way better job as far as dynamics, percussion, because there's a bunch of drums and it goes all the way from like toms all the way down to the bass drum, a lot of cymbals too, but also a lot of three-dimensionality and a lot of space. So there's a bunch of stuff moving across the soundstage. Not only did the AKM chip do a better job dynamically, but it also did a better job with, I feel like, placing things in space. This is where it gets a little bit hard to tell because the 9038 did a good job of imaging too. But with the AKM, I thought it was locked in a little bit better. And then the genius of this piece occurred to me. It just depends. Depends on what you're listening to. There's another wrinkle in this comparison too, though, and that is the output of the Sabre portion. The 9038 is louder than the output of the AKM 4493. And I have heard this before with the J2 coming out of Gishelli Labs, because when I'm trying to compare other DACs, other Sabre DACs to the 4493 J2, the 4493 output was lower. Okay, so when you try to compare by ear two devices with different voltage outputs, it's really difficult. That's why I try to concentrate on voices and things. And I could just be full of it. These things may sound exactly the same, but I didn't think they did. And I was able to pick them out when I closed my eyes. I was able to pick them out on the remote control. Some of that probably has to do with the different voltage outputs. Anyway, depending upon what track you're listening to, absolutely 100% made a difference in which side of this DAC I preferred. I get a kick out of it. I like it. I think it's fun. I think you can tell a difference between the two different sides of this DAC. I would probably, if you get it, save up and get a linear power supply later, or a super low noise 12 volts switching power supply. I would also start to mess around with swapping out the op amps and see if you can tell a difference. But at $160, you're basically getting two different DACs, which is fun. It's in a good chassis, actually great chassis. You can see inside it. Comes with a remote control. The display is actually usable. You can see it across the room. I have absolutely no complaints with this thing. Ton of fun and some upgrade path with it. I was listening to the Q Acoustics 5010s through the TIAC AI303 using the Weem Pro streamer. Great little system. Fun little DAC. If you like this video, you need to check out my video on the best amplifiers of 2024. I'll put it right here or right here. Thank you so much for watching.